Hi, I'm Kent. How much colorant do I need to add into my matte glaze? I've been playing around with my matte glaze recently, and when I originally mixed it up, I just picked kind of an arbitrary percentage of colorant to add in. I've been playing around with old Forge Creations glazes, and for white, he suggested 10% by dry weight of zircopax or zirconium. So that's what I did for my matte white glaze. For my black glaze, I just picked an arbitrary 5% black mason stain. The colors were nice and saturated, so that was good, but do I need this much? I really don't know. So in this video, I'm going to do a quick test with a blend to see what the impact of the percentage of colorant in the glazes actually is. So here are my two glazes. So this one's black with 5% by dry weight of black mason stain. This one's white, 10% by dry weight of zirconium. And here's the base glaze all by itself with nothing added into it. I want to use these existing ones as the top. I'll use nothing as the bottom, and I'm going to do a couple tests in the middle. Let's start with the white, and you can see I have a bunch of test tiles here all laid out. So at one end, I just want the plain base glaze. This probably isn't going to be very interesting, but we're going to do it anyways, just for completeness. There it is. I haven't used these much recently, but I have a video of making the mold for these, which was an interesting exercise. And these test tiles wound up being just the right size, so I could clasp them with 100 grams of slip, which was very convenient. And totally an accident. All right, so that's one end. That's 0%. Here's the other end. There we go. Let's do the middle one next, but this container is big, so I'm just going to pour some glaze into this smaller container to make it easier to work with. All right, and I can do this by volume since the glaze is already mixed up. And then we'll go up to double that. And normally I use my immersion blender to mix up my glazes, but these are thoroughly mixed first. And so really I just need all the colorants to go together. All right, so we'll do the test tile in the middle. Half 0%, half 10%, so that would be 5%. All right, I got two more test tiles I want to fill in the middle. So I still basically have 6 ounces, so I'm going to put 3 ounces in here. Just splitting it now. So now to get halfway between these, I just need to mix the same amount. So if this is 3 ounces, I need to add 3 more ounces into this. Back up to 6. And 3 more ounces to this one. And these numbers, could be ounces, milliliters, whatever, don't really matter as long as the percentages are correct. So this is half 0% and half 5%, which was the middle. So this is 2.5% of the opacifier. And this one is half 5% and half 10%. That makes this one 7.5. All right, so let's go ahead and mark this one. So this one is 0. It's an underglaze pencil. This one's 2.5. This one is 5. 7.5. And this one's the full up 10. I'll set these to the side. Okay, let's do the same thing for the black. So this one, as I mentioned, is 5% by dry weight of black mason stain. We're gonna have one black. We don't need the 0% since we just did that one. And one in the middle, so that'll be 2.5%. One between these two, so that's half of 2.5, so 1.25. And then 3.75. So this one's easy, we can just dip it. And I don't think we quite need 3. I think 2 is probably enough. So let's do that. All right, 2 and 2. That gives us 4. Go ahead and dip this. There we go. 0 will be used for the other test, 1.25, 2.5, 3.75, and the original 5%. All right, let me go ahead and mark those the same way, and we'll put them into the glaze firing. Let's see what we get. All right, we got the test tiles out of the glaze firing. So here they are all lined up. So overall impressions are good. It's doing the right thing. It's going from lighter here in the middle where there is nothing added to darker on the outsides. So we're seeing some variation in the colors. Maybe it's a little bit harder to tell with the whites, but they're there. The other thing that struck me, which wasn't actually part of the test, but I've suspected this the few times I've used this, is this glaze seems pretty sensitive to the application thickness. So I think I'm starting to get some alligatoring or crawling going on here. So I think this went on a little bit too thick. So with the whites, so this one is 0%, so it's just the base glaze. 2.5% and 5% of the Zirco packs added. Starting to get a little bit more white. Here we got a little bit of crawling. And then going all the way up to the 10%. It seems like it's getting worse the higher it gets, so this glaze may also be sensitive to the amount of additions in it. I know matte glazes are a little tricky in their chemistry. They're kind of right on the edge of what works for a glaze. So it could be that the zirconium is throwing off that matte glaze. And then going the other direction with the black mason stain. So this one here is the one I did originally, and it's definitely black. I can tell a difference between these two. Not sure if it's actually showing up on the camera, but this one's definitely a hint darker. Lighter still. And then we have a rapid fall off into this gray. So there may be room to play around here to try and get different shades of gray out of this one. I think down here it's really about how saturated the black gets. Let me show these up close. So this here is the whitest one compared to no opacifier, and there's definitely a difference there. And this one's the 5%. And in person, I can still see a difference, but it's not that strong. Likewise, the two darkest ones and the two lighter ones. So at least for me, that was an informative test. I was curious about how much I really needed to add into this glaze, and I'm getting a better sense now. I'll still need to think about which color I finally want on my pots, but now I have these test tiles that I can go back to and check against to figure that out. It's always fun to ask you guys which one you think is your favorite. Do you have one? I was going to end this video here, however, I've got a special bonus for you. When I was mixing up this test, I wound up with a bunch of extra glaze of varying percentages, and I decided to go ahead and use it up. So I'm going to jump back in time and show you using all the leftover glazes to glaze a bunch more pots. I wasn't planning on filming this, but I think the result might be interesting, so I'm going to go ahead and shoot it. So here's kind of the carnage of all of that glazing, but I went ahead and just kind of poured it in randomly, and I'm getting this kind of swirly effect. So here's some of the earlier ones I did. They're already starting to dry. I think the glaze is going a little too thick. It's cracking a little bit, but there's interesting variations. This one too. And I've just been taking the glaze as it's going in and dumping it back in. So I don't have enough to dip on. But there's this interesting variation that I'm wondering if will show up. Just about out of that one. I got some of this one. It's a different mix. So you can see these swirly effects. So each time I do this, it gets a little bit more mixed. Eventually it's heading towards gray. Using my pot tool, I'm not actually dipping that pots, but this is a good way to hold on to them. So this one's a little more variegated. I'm going to go ahead and use the rest of this glaze up this way, and I'll show you the results. So how did all these bonus pots turn out? Well, it's kind of good news, bad news. The good news is the glaze effects are really cool, especially for something that I did on a whim and was just trying out. The bad news is all of these pots cracked. These were the last pots I did for my glaze firing, and I guess they were still too damp. I went ahead and candled my kiln for a while, knowing that they were still maybe a little bit wet, but apparently it wasn't enough. However, I wanted to show you guys the results anyways. So here are all the pots, and I have no idea where to begin. Well, maybe the obvious thing is they all cracked. So this one here is really cool. I'm not a fan of crazed glazes in general, and as I was alluding to earlier with the test tiles, I think if the glaze goes on too thick, it has this tendency to craze. However, the problem is this pot is not one pot. It is 2 pieces. I think this is one of the most severe cracks, although we might find some others. So here's all the swirly effect, different layers of the glaze showing through. Not what I was going for, but really cool. This one here, this side seemed fine. Here it crazed again. This is probably towards the end when I was getting to be everything kind of homogeneous, so in the middle of all the mixes, so very grayish. Here I have the darker color black against the lighter white. Again, some crazing here. There's the crack in this one. It's kind of the stark contrast is pretty cool. Again, we have this kind of really cool cascaded colors from pouring it on. Some crazing showing the texture. Big crack. That's fun. Here we're getting more towards a more homogeneous mix of gray, but still very streaky, which is fun. Again, mostly gray. And again, where it crawled off to the side. Very funky, crazy texture. And another one. Again, stark white and black, this marbled effect with the glaze. So as I said, good news, bad news. I'm very glad I tried that, and I'm glad I went ahead and filmed trying it. Wasn't exactly the point of this video, but I always like pottery and all the fun surprises we get, in addition to the not so fun surprises we get occasionally. I have not gone looking into how to repair cracked pots before. I've seen there's a few techniques where you can go and put some precious metals in there and fuse it together, but these are cool enough, I might want to go ahead and try and save them. The answer may just be super glue. We'll see. If you have any ideas of fusing together cracked pots, and these cracked pots in particular, let me know. So there you have it, the main test where I was looking at the amount of opacifiers in this matte glaze, and the bonus test of let's throw together white and black glaze and toss it over some pots and see what happens. Next time, I'm also going to let my pots dry out a little bit more. I like getting these videos through so I can get them to you, but it's not worth having a cracked pot. As always, if you have any questions or comments, let me know. Thanks.